We begin in the Gaza Strip, where the World Health Organization says not enough aid is reaching civilians. Intensified fighting in northern and central Gaza has also halted several deliveries of medical supplies and fuel to hospitals. Israeli troops are trying to root out Hamas militants who carried out deadly terror attacks in Israel 3 months ago.
Grabbing all they can from a truck west of Gaza City. Bags of flour, boxes of canned food. Throughout the territory, Gazans face mass hunger and disease. The UN says 1 in 4 are starving. The majority of Gaza's population has been displaced at least once since the start of the war. Most depend on cross-border aid for survival. Those displaced say they are living in absolute desperation.
We have lost hope. We've been listening to the news for 98 days, hoping that the war will end, but there is no hope. All we see is this difficult situation we are in. We have no water or electricity. Since water is scarce, we can only shower once a month. It's taking a toll on our mental health, and there are diseases spreading everywhere.
Pressure to allow more aid into Gaza is mounting on Israel. The opening of a crossing at the Israel-Egypt border has not significantly increased the rate of deliveries. Aid trucks are often delayed, waiting for security checks. But Israel's military says it has now increased its capacity for screening.
We are ready and willing to facilitate as much humanitarian aid as the world will give, especially essential aid like food, medicine, and shelter. We do security checks on humanitarian aid trucks for weapons before they enter Gaza. We have increased our screening capacity considerably.
But even when aid gets through, distribution is another problem. In the absence of security guarantees and intensified offensives around hospitals in northern Gaza, vital medical supplies can't get to people who need it most.
It means that hospitals don't have fuel. It means that patients don't have food. It means that there aren't supplies to care for the patients.
UN agencies say humanitarian corridors for aid are needed now to save lives.
And earlier I spoke with Christian Lindmeier from the World Health Organization. I asked him whether his staff were noticing a difference on the ground after the Israeli army said it would facilitate more aid into Gaza.
So the willingness is, of course, great, but no, we have not seen any changes on the ground. The words have yet to translate into action on the ground. The problem for us is any permissions or any aid coming in or evacuees going out is way too ad hoc. It cannot be planned. Convoys sit for days waiting to get in. Convoys sit inside Gaza wanting to go to the north and are waiting for permissions, although everything was planned as according to the instructions given. The ad hoc situation, that's the problem we're dealing with. And of course, in a short amount of time, in a short window, there can never be enough help brought to people, even if the roads are then clear of attacks, clear of bombs, and clear of debris in order to bring material in or further up into Gaza.
What is most urgently needed at the moment?
That's a tricky question. It's nearly everything. I mean, first of all, right now it's really food and water for the people. Patients, including the patients on the operating tables and then right after surgery, are begging for water and for food. It needs fuel, of course, to run the hospitals, to run the generators, to run ambulances. And then it needs a lot of medical equipment, from simple bandages and wound dressings to anesthetics in order to have amputations to be done under anesthesia and not without, to anything in between. So, but this is there. It's there, and that's the important part. It is ready. It's outside. All the UN agencies are ready to deliver. The convoys, as your pictures show, are miles long, partly waiting outside. It needs to get in. That procedure needs to be speeded up. And then, of course, inside Gaza, the distribution is crucial.
And that was Christian Lindmeier from the World Health Organization. Meanwhile, the U.S. Secretary of State is in the occupied West Bank for talks with Palestinian leaders. Antony Blinken has been meeting with the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah. Washington hopes that the Palestinian Authority could govern Gaza after Israel's war with Hamas. Blinken is on a diplomatic tour of the Middle East to try and prevent the conflict from spreading. He earlier urged Israel to reduce the number of civilian casualties as it battles Hamas militants. Earlier, I spoke with DW correspondent Tanya Kramer in Jerusalem and asked her what Blinken wanted to achieve there.
Well, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said he wanted to talk to the Palestinian leadership, in particular Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, about post-war scenarios for Gaza, what the role of the Palestinian Authority could be. He also talked about that he wants to talk about reforming the Palestinian Authority for it to be able to play a role in such scenarios. Now, you have to understand the Palestinian Authority has only limited governing control in some parts of the occupied West Bank. They haven't been in Gaza since Hamas seized power there in 2007. But in general, the Palestinian Authority has lost a lot of popularity also among ordinary Palestinians. There have been no general elections since 2006. Now, for Palestinians there in Ramallah, they of course want to hear from the Americans what they are doing to end the war in Gaza, but also what are they doing to protect the civilians, their civilian population, not just in Gaza, but also in the occupied West Bank, where there has been an increase in settler violence. And we heard Antony Blinken talking about that in his remarks on Tuesday evening. He said he condemned the violence by extremist Israeli settlers, but also displacement by communities in the occupied West Bank and demolitions. And another very important issue for Palestinians is that the Americans will pressure the Israeli government to release tax revenues they're withholding. They need it for a functioning Palestinian Authority, and that's also in the interest, the U.S. Secretary of State said, for Israel, that the Palestinian Authority is not further weakened but strengthened to play its role.
Blinken also calling on Israel to be a partner to Palestinian leaders. But I mean, you've highlighted it there. In the face of this open conflict now with Hamas, can the two sides find common ground?
I think there's not much common ground right now because also we've been hearing repeatedly from the Israeli government, from officials there, that they don't see a role for the Palestinian Authority in Gaza, or they have been very vague when it comes to plans how this will look like. They're talking about Palestinian entities governing Gaza, but they're not very clearly on who they mean by that. Also, that is very much on the U.S. agenda. Antony Blinken has talked a lot about the prospects, or that there should be the creation of a Palestinian state on the horizon. He has also held talks in the region with other leaders. He has been to Saudi Arabia there, and he says there is a framework in place, but it needs to have this Palestinian state on the horizon. That is what's needed to achieve security and peace in the region, and that this needs, also the support of Israel. They have to make some hard choices there.
Tanya Kramer in Jerusalem, thank you. And here are some other stories making news around the world. The German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock is in Lebanon, where she has been holding talks with the country's caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati. They discussed tensions between Israel and the Shiite Lebanese Hezbollah militia. Baerbock will also visit German soldiers stationed on a frigate in the Beirut harbor during the trip.